An original podcast from podlatino.com.
When someone we admire enters our lives, something strange happens inside us. It isn't always pure admiration. Sometimes what shows up is an uncomfortable feeling that's hard to name, a comparison that settles in on its own and starts whispering awkward questions. Why does that person have more presence? Why do they take up more space? Why is everyone looking at them and not at me? It's a very human reaction, and a very old one. So old, in fact, that there was already a story for it long before we had the words we use today to describe it. On a quiet afternoon, near a pond surrounded by green grass and damp earth, a small and ordinary frog lived her life, the way all frogs do. She leapt between stones, hunted insects, rested along the bank. She wasn't a special frog. Nothing set her apart from the rest. She was simply a frog, among many frogs, in a world that seemed made just for her. Then one day, the ox arrived. He was enormous. His legs were like tree trunks. His body cast a shadow that covered the frog entirely, and a wide stretch of ground around her. When the ox moved to drink from the pond, the earth seemed to feel it. The frog watched him in silence, and something shifted inside her. It wasn't fear. It wasn't hatred. It was something closer to desire. She wanted that presence, that size, that way of moving through the world as if everything around you simply notices. So she did what she could do. She started to puff herself up. She drew in air, inflated her small body as much as she could, and asked the other frogs nearby whether she looked as big as the ox yet. The others looked at her with something between confusion and pity. "No," they said. "Not yet." The frog took another deep breath, puffed up more, asked again. The answers stayed the same. No, still not there, still too small. And she kept trying. More air, more tension, more effort. Every no was a reason to keep going, not a reason to stop, until her body couldn't hold any more. The ending of this fable is abrupt, and that abruptness is part of what makes it powerful. There's no warning, no second chance. There's a limit, and when it's reached, that's it. The frog wanted to be something she wasn't, and that insistence destroyed her. Not the ox, who wasn't even looking at her. Her own refusal to stop pushing against her nature is what did it. This story is most commonly linked to the name of Aesop, the Greek storyteller whose figure is so legendary that it's difficult to separate the historical person from the tales attributed to him. He lived, according to various sources, around the 6th century before the Common Era. Tradition holds that he was enslaved, and that he used animal stories to say things that would have been impossible to say out loud any other way. His fables weren't born as written texts. They were spoken, passed from mouth to mouth for a long time before anyone wrote them down. The story of the frog and the ox was part of those ancient collections, and over time it crossed borders and changed languages many times over. Centuries later, the French poet Jean de La Fontaine returned to this fable and turned it into one of his most well-known poems. La Fontaine wrote for the court of King Louis XIV, and although his fables carried the elegant tone of 17th-century poetry, their messages pointed with real precision at very specific behaviors in the world around him. Vanity, ambition, the need to be seen as more than you are. Things that needed little explanation in an environment where image was practically everything. The frog, who wanted to be an ox, fit perfectly into that world, even if the story itself came from somewhere much older. What's striking is how well it still fits today. We live in a time when comparison is almost impossible to avoid. You don't need to be standing by a pond watching an ox. You just need to open your phone and see someone else's life, filtered, edited, and presented at its very best. The trip you didn't take, the house you don't have, the job title that sounds more impressive than yours, the body that looks healthier, stronger, more rested, and something inside us starts doing exactly what the frog did. It starts to inflate, to exaggerate, to project a version of ourselves that isn't entirely real, hoping no one notices the gap between what we are and what we're trying to appear to be. That's not a moral failing. The frog in this fable wasn't a bad creature. She was insecure. And that insecurity led her down a path that ended badly. The problem wasn't wanting to be bigger. It was that in order to get there, she stopped being what she actually was. She wasn't looking to truly grow. She was looking to seem. And there's an enormous distance between those two things. Growing takes time, effort, and real change. Seeming means holding up an image that doesn't match what's on the inside, and that takes a kind of energy that runs out eventually. You can pretend for a while. You can keep the illusion going for some time. But the body, like the frog's, has limits. And when the pressure that's been building has nowhere to go, something breaks. There's something else worth noticing in this story. The ox never knew the frog existed. He wasn't there to challenge her, wasn't provoking her, wasn't asking to be compared to her. He was enormous simply because he was an ox. That was all he was doing. And yet his mere presence was enough to set off everything that happened to her. What hurt the frog wasn't the ox. It was the story she told herself about what it meant to be small, next to something that large. That inner story is the one that does the most damage. The one that says, what you have isn't enough, that what you are isn't sufficient, that you need to be different, more, better, more visible, more recognized, just to deserve your place at the pond. And while that story runs on repeat inside, the effort of holding up an image that doesn't belong to you keeps growing until it becomes impossible to sustain. This fable isn't saying you should settle for what you have, or that wanting more is dangerous. What it shows is something more specific than that. Puffing yourself up to look like someone else doesn't lead anywhere good. Constant comparison, when it becomes the driving force behind what you do and how you present yourself, ends up disconnecting people from who they actually are. And that disconnection has a real cost. There's something quietly reassuring about knowing this story is more than 2,000 years old. Not because the problems of today are the same as those of back then, but because it shows that this tension between who we are and who we want to appear to be is nothing new. It isn't a generational weakness or a problem invented by technology. It's part of what it means to be a creature that compares, that glances sideways, that wants to be seen and valued. What changes are the ponds? The ox takes different shapes, but the frog, somewhere, is always watching.